Alright, firstly, the opinions contained herein are mine and mine alone. You may agree, you may disagree, that's fine. But what are the differences between comics and manga? Well, let's have a look here. This is a Gunsmith Cats first comic put out by Dark Horse around 1996. This is the manga they put out at the same time. This is the first chapter of this. So basically, this has 4 chapters. It contains the first 4 issues of this comic book run, and it went to 10 issues in total. So the art, the dialogue, even the fact that this goes from left to right, everything's the same. But it's not, obviously. This is a book. This is a periodical. This I've never read and never will. This I've read. This has the ability to be much more valuable than this. But in order for that to be able to do so, it needs to go into one of these, and it needs basically a 9.8 instead of an 8.0. This I've read. This I love. That is why it's an 8.0. Because I've read this, I enjoyed it, and it means a lot to me because I remember buying it, where I bought it, when I bought it, who I bought it from. Anyways, book, periodical. Now, why does that matter? Well, there was a time when it really didn't. If you think about it, way back when, periodicals, you could get them from any corner store, grocery stores had them, magazines, news shops, they're all over the place, right? In the age of the internet, you may have noticed newspapers are way less common than they used to be. You don't see a lot of magazines at shops anymore. Even at grocery stores, yes, they have some. Not as many as they used to. Basically, people get their magazine-like articles off the internet these days. However, they still buy books. Maybe not as much as they used to, but they still buy a lot of books. So that's important. Comics have been affected by this sort of transitioning into a digital media. Basically, they don't sell as much as they used to. Books still sell pretty well. So that's one of the advantages that manga have, is that they're still in bookstores. Amazon. Does Amazon sell comics? Not really. Yeah, you can buy comics off of eBay, but Amazon sells way more books than they do periodicals. Point number 1. Point number 2. I'm not sure how much of this is because of the digital age and whatnot, but people buy these to collect. They don't read them. I haven't read that one. I haven't read this one either. This is a 1 in 11 black and white Arthur Sudium. I'll get into variants here in a bit, but I mean, I've read this. If I had the comic version of this, I wouldn't have read it. This is, and again, this is not particularly valuable. We'll get into that too. But people buy comics to collect them. They don't read them. Why is this important? Well, it's important because DC and Marvel have now had to adapt to that market. So what they do, they produce very nice covers. They use variants, whether it's 1 in 10, 1 in 25, 1 in 50, 1 in 100, even up to 1 in 1000. Manga has a little bit of this. Like, I'll be honest, like, you've seen the Barnes and Noble exclusives. We've seen New York Comic Con variants as well. But comics have way more of that than manga does. Why this is important for manga is that people just want to read it. So they'll try and get the cheapest version they can, generally. This is why digital manga sales are rising, right? Because it's much easier. If I just want to read it, I'll get the app and I'll read it that way, and I'll pay a very small fee. Comics, I want the best return on my investment. So if I'm going to buy a book for $20, I want that to appreciate. The only emotional investment I have is financial investment. So it's like gambling, right? So I'm putting my money on this particular slot on the great roulette wheel for this particular comic book title for this month. The wheel spins and maybe it doesn't go up, right? Now, it doesn't mean it goes to zero, but will it be what I spent on it? Right? And honestly, really only one, you have about the same odds, about a 1 in 40. So is that one going to hit? Is that going to be the big boom? So what do people do? It's like, well, I'm going to put $10 here, 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 here. The wheel spins and maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it hits 0, 0 and none of them really appreciate that month. But, you know, if you're lucky and you have that one title, boom, it goes up in value. Everybody wants it. What I'm trying to say here is that comic book buyers don't get their high from the story. They get their high from the value of the book, or, you know, fair market value, perceived value, whatever it is. It's how much is that comic worth? Manga readers get their high from the actual story. For example, like comics are key appearances, like the first appearance. Let's take Oh My Goddess, for example. This is, you know, it's a run of 48. Has first, it's not technically the first spell dandy because I'll get into that in a second. This is its English version. So you would think that one, being the number 1, would be worth more. Not at all. 18, 19, and 20 are worth way more than this. And the reason is because they were underprinted. They're just harder to find. And it gets to the other big difference is comic buyers buy keys. Manga buyers buy collections. They want the whole run on their shelf, right? So, and why do they want the whole run? It's because they read it. And if you're reading something, you don't want to be missing, you know, certain issues, because I want to read the whole story. Manga is a story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Comics are a narrative. Like this is Doctor Strange from 1974. It's in terrible shape. That's because people used to read comics back in the 70s. They read the heck out of them. It has, you know, detached pages. They're cream. There's a lot of ads in here. Spine roll, you name it. Terrible shape. But this, you would say, is a narrative, right? There are many stories with Doctor Strange. Does he have a beginning? Yeah, for sure. Middle? Yeah. Will he have an ending? I highly doubt it. There will be an ending to certain arcs, but Marvel Disney will continue to use that character for as long as they think they can make money off of it. And basically is because they own the intellectual property to that character. They own the intellectual property to pretty much all the Marvel characters. Not so with this, right? Now, manga gets complicated because you have partnerships. This is Kenichi Sonoda, but I guarantee he has a say in what happens to these characters he's created, right? So when there's an anime, there's certain licensing that goes on, there's certain negotiations and whatnot, and I'm not a legal expert, but I know the estate of Stan Lee doesn't have a lot of say in what happens to Doctor Strange, just because the work for hire agreements, and that's what's happened with DC and Marvel. Anyway, here's the other big difference between manga and comics, is because it's a collector's market. Now this is CBCS. I have CGC is the big one, but I think that's been like the biggest change I've seen to propel the collector's market have been these things. Now CGC was invented or founded in 2000, and I've noticed since that date, like there's definitely been a marked move towards the collecting hobby versus the reading. What's interesting, I'm going to put up some Shonen Jump from old ones, and you'll see like the most valuable are the first Dragon Ball, and I think that's from 1984, and the One Piece Shonen Jumps. Now Shonen Jumps are truly the first appearances of these characters because, in case you don't know, like usually they're published in these 500-page monstrosities, periodicals, before they are serialized in manga. And this is kind of like their test run, for example, like Shonen Jump. So it was just kind of funny to me that Shonen Jump is a lot closer to a comic book, except that it's 500 freaking pages of many different stories, than the manga is. But these are the ones that are really more valuable than the most expensive manga. So it seems like there's a collector's market coming in, even in the Japanese, but it's through the periodicals. Leads me to my next point, is that basically any manga we read, it's not its first incarnation, right? Because manga is ESL. It's basically English as a second language. And I wouldn't say it's even a second language because manga is published throughout the world. And the English language manga is often outsold, not only by the Japanese, but even the French. So, like for example, this is in English, but I can guarantee it was in Japanese long before it was in English. I don't want to badmouth modern comics because they have a lot of challenges, especially the ones with Marvel and DC. You're basically dealing with legacy characters that these companies acquired the rights to decades and decades and decades ago. And it's a challenge to make them interesting, right? Because the worlds have been long established. That's one of the things I really enjoy about manga, is that it is new, right? So every time you open up that volume 1, it can be a completely new world, completely new characters you haven't met before, you have no expectations for. This isn't, and that's probably the last thing I want to get to, is that the other differences between, especially comics from the big two and manga, is that you're dealing with characters that can be like 80 years old. You kind of know them, you know what to expect, and if you don't get what you expect, you're kind of upset a little bit, right? It's like you've gone and you've fundamentally changed a character I enjoyed. Manga, there is no preset expectations, and unless you've seen the anime, of course. But it's, it's a new world. It's anything can happen, and that's not true with comics, because you sort of know what to expect. You know what they're about, and it may be a different take on it, and it could be cool, but it's not the same. It's not like this is going to blow me away because, oh my God, what's going on here? I never saw that coming. Or this is like, it blew my mind because, this just happened to the world. And whoa. But, manga can do that because they don't need to keep going ad infinitum. It's, they can have a beginning, middle, and end. And that ending could be a literal ending. It could be like everybody dies. And hopefully not, because we all want our happily ever after. But there is that possibility. You don't have that so much with comics. How many original creators are still working at DC and Marvel on their titles? Like, I can't think of any of characters they created. Like, it's all, no, I can't. I really can't think of any. Manga, I can't think of, well, I know of one that isn't, and that's basically Berserk. But Kentaro Miura, they're pretty sure he would be comfortable with his team fleshing out his ideas. That's pretty much the only example I can think of. So, this is the last point, is that comics, basically that IP is continued on by whomever they believe will sell books. Manga, it's the original creator or the writer and artist that began it. It's basically attached to the creator or creators if there's an artist. Western comics, DC, Marvel, it's corporate. So it's whomever the company feels can sell them books, as opposed to this is the concept that the original creator had. Like I said, manga is basically a story, and it's really one person's story, to be honest. It's the original author. Comics are a business. They own the characters lock, stock, and barrel. If they think they can make money, whether it's licensing them to theme parks, merchandise, or these funny books, so be it. That's what they'll do. So I would say manga is art, comics is business. Now, that's not to say there's no business to manga. There certainly is. And that's not to say there's no art to comics, because there is. But manga is much more concerned about, or deals much more with, the world of art than modern comics does. Modern comics is a brand. It's about the brand equity. Manga is about telling a story. So, anyway, I'm rambling. I'm an old man, I ramble. Thanks for watching again. Sorry about the funky lighting. I've got my overhead lights on. And, like I said, I wanted to get this out there. And normally I stick to facts, but every so often I got to break into opinion. Thanks again. Talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.